From the moment the Chevrolet Chevelle first rolled onto American streets in the mid-1960s, it carried in its steel frame a quiet defiance that no one at Ford or Dodge fully anticipated. At first glance, it looked like the respectable, squared-off, all-American family car meant for workdays, Sunday church drives, and weekends on the coast. Yet beneath its modest, almost conservative appearance, there was a restless mechanical heartbeat waiting to break free. The engineers at Chevrolet knew exactly what they were doing. They were watching the rising wave of the muscle car era and understood that raw power alone was not enough. What buyers wanted was personality, presence, and the ability to dominate stoplight duels with effortless authority. The Chevelle would soon become the machine that humiliated Ford and Dodge not out of arrogance, but simply because it had the strength, the technology, and the engineering refinement that others underestimated. When Chevrolet introduced the Chevelle in 1964, the company faced strong rivals. Ford had made waves with the early Mustang. Dodge was beginning to experiment with larger engines and aggressive styling. But Chevrolet had something different in mind, a car that could serve as both a daily driver and a street legend, a car whose identity could transform depending on who ordered it and what options they selected. The Chevelle quickly became one of the most versatile platforms ever released by General Motors. Buyers could choose from humble inline-six engines all the way to monstrous big-block V8s that would come to define American performance for a generation. This flexibility allowed Chevrolet to satisfy families and adrenaline addicts alike, something Ford and Dodge failed to achieve with the same precision. As the years moved forward, the Chevelle began to shed its discreet, understated character and embrace a more muscular look. By 1966, the lines had grown sharper, the stance lower, and the attitude unmistakably more aggressive. Engineers understood that aerodynamics and design played a psychological role. A car that looked powerful was halfway to being powerful. Ford's Fairlane and Dodge's Coronet tried to keep up, but neither possessed the perfect balance that made the Chevelle feel intuitive in the hands of its drivers. Even before Chevrolet unleashed the truly monstrous versions, enthusiasts were praising the Chevelle's chassis stiffness, its predictable handling, and its ability to take modifications with grace. It became a favorite on drag strips long before achieving iconic supercar status. The real turning point came with the Chevelle SS models, especially the legendary SS 396. This was not just a car, it was a declaration. With the SS 396, Chevrolet proved it could build a machine that left Ford and Dodge gasping for air. The big block V8 delivered its power with a smooth yet devastating surge, unlike the sometimes rough, inconsistent outputs of Dodge's early muscle engines. Ford had respectable performance, especially with its FE series engines, but the Chevelle simply had more consistency across different driving situations. It launched harder, pulled longer, and felt more composed when pushed to its limits. Owners immediately noticed that the Chevelle could overpower its competition without feeling unstable or unpredictable. Much of this advantage came from Chevrolet's deliberate engineering choices. The suspension was tuned to manage weight transfer under acceleration, which allowed drivers to maintain traction during hard launches. While Dodge struggled with wheel hop and Ford battled chassis flex, the Chevelle planted itself onto the pavement with confidence, making even average drivers feel like seasoned drag racers. This became one of the reasons Ford and Dodge enthusiasts often found themselves frustrated when racing against a properly tuned Chevelle. The Chevrolet simply wasted less energy fighting its own design limitations. But the moment the Chevelle truly embarrassed its rivals was when Chevrolet introduced the LS6454 in 1970. This engine became something of a myth in American car culture, partly because its raw numbers were so shocking that even government regulators took notice. With an advertised 450 horsepower, though most experts agree it was significantly higher in reality, the LS6 transformed the Chevelle into a road-legal missile. Ford had nothing comparable in mass production at that moment, and Dodge's Hemi, while legendary, was expensive, rare, and often not fully utilized by everyday drivers due to its tuning complexity. The Chevelle LS6, in contrast, delivered devastating performance straight from the showroom floor without requiring specialized knowledge or aftermarket tuning. Owners described the experience of driving an LS6 Chevelle as something unforgettable. There was a deep mechanical growl that shook the windows of nearby buildings. The moment the throttle opened, the car unleashed a surge of torque that pinned the driver to the seat and made passengers shout involuntarily. The sensation wasn't wild or chaotic, it was disciplined strength, the kind that made drivers feel like they were controlling pure American engineering at its peak. Ford and Dodge muscle cars, even those with strong engines, often lacked the perfect marriage of stability, traction, and torque management that Chevrolet achieved with the LS6 platform. That gap made many owners of rival brands admit, sometimes grudgingly, that the Chevelle had something special. But strength alone does not create a legend. What truly humiliated Ford and Dodge was how gracefully the Chevelle balanced everyday usability with extreme performance. While Dodge built some cars that were almost too aggressive for city streets and Ford focused heavily on marketing rather than engineering, the Chevelle remained grounded in reality. It was a car families could drive daily without discomfort, yet one that could instantly transform into a dragstrip contender with minimal changes. Mechanics loved working on it because Chevrolet designed the engine bay with accessibility in mind. The wiring was straightforward, the components overbuilt, and the modular nature of GM parts meant owners could upgrade their vehicles easily and affordably. Ford's compact engine bays and Dodge's heavier, more temperamental components made similar work far more challenging. Chevelle owners formed a culture marked by confidence but not arrogance. They knew what their cars could do. On weekends, they lined up next to Mustangs, Chargers, Road Runners, and Fairlanes. Time after time, the Chevelle walked away victorious, its tires leaving long stripes of burnt rubber on the pavement while its defeated rivals sputtered in embarrassment. The car gained a reputation that spread quickly across states. Younger drivers bragged about their Chevelles outrunning larger displacement Fords or Dodges. Even older men who had grown up with earlier hot rod traditions found themselves drawn to the Chevelle's combination of brute strength and refined engineering. The Chevelle's dominance wasn't only on the streets, it also emerged in sanctioned racing. It became a staple at NHRA events, where it proved durable under extreme pressure. The LS6 model gained so much notoriety on drag strips that Ford and Dodge spent millions trying to develop new engines and platforms to catch up. Yet, even when they managed to produce respectable competitors, the Chevelle's legacy had already been solidified. It was no longer just a car, it was the symbol of an era in which Chevrolet held absolute power over the American muscle world. Chevrolet's success came not from luck but from understanding the American spirit. Drivers wanted more than transportation, they wanted identity, rebellion, and raw mechanical freedom. The Chevelle delivered all of this. It carried the imagery of long highways, neon lights reflecting off polished chrome, and evenings spent racing under the roar of V8 engines. Ford and Dodge tried to follow that same path, but the Chevelle had already defined it so clearly that competitors were always playing catch-up. Even decades later, the Chevelle's reputation remains untouched. Restorers and collectors treat these cars with reverence, aware that they represent a golden age of American engineering. Modern performance enthusiasts continue to choose Chevelles as foundations for high-horsepower builds because the original structure remains solid even under modern demands. This longevity stands in sharp contrast to many rival models whose designs aged poorly or required extensive reinforcement. As the 1970s progressed, the legend of the Chevelle continued to grow, not only because of its power but because of the emotional reactions it generated in those who drove it. For many Americans, owning a Chevelle meant more than having a fast car. It symbolized independence, the thrill of challenge, and the idea that ordinary people could control extraordinary machines. Young men saved every dollar from part-time jobs to buy used Chevelles, while older drivers who had once raced in their youth purchased them as weekend toys to relive old memories. The car brought generations together in a way few vehicles ever could. Fathers taught their sons how to adjust carburetors on warm Saturday afternoons. Mechanics offered advice freely because they respected anyone who kept a Chevelle on the road. Even rival owners from Ford and Dodge communities begrudgingly acknowledged the car's significance. The Chevelle's domination in street culture was reinforced by countless personal stories. Drivers told of outrunning high-powered Dodges with ease, surprising Mustang owners who underestimated the car's capabilities, and pulling up next to GTOs only to leave them shrinking in the rearview mirror. Many of these stories became small legends within local car clubs. The Chevelle gained a powerful mythology because real-life experiences backed up the reputation. There was nothing inflated or exaggerated about its abilities. The car genuinely delivered. Its engines were built with generous tolerances, its drivetrain components proved remarkably durable, and the frame absorbed power in a way that made it feel unbreakable. While Ford owners frequently complained about cracked engine mounts or chassis strain under heavy loads, Chevelle drivers rarely faced such issues. Another factor that consistently humiliated Ford and Dodge was Chevrolet's ability to create engines that delivered both high performance and reliability. The LS6454 remains the centerpiece of this achievement, but even the smaller 396 and the high-performance 402 had a level of refinement that rival companies struggled to match at scale. Chevrolet's approach to fuel delivery, ignition timing, and combustion efficiency allowed their engines to generate impressive horsepower without requiring constant tuning. In contrast, the legendary 426 Hemi from Dodge, though extremely powerful, was notorious for being difficult to keep in perfect running condition for everyday street use. Ford's large displacement engines often felt strong in the upper RPM range but lacked the low-end torque that made the Chevelle so intimidating from a standstill. This torque advantage became a key part of the Chevelle's identity. When the light turned green, the Chevelle didn't need to scream to announce itself. The big block engine simply inhaled deeply and launched forward with a force that seemed to compress the air around it. Passengers were often stunned by how immediate and violent the acceleration felt. This instant torque created a sensation of invulnerability, as though the car possessed an endless supply of power waiting to be unleashed with the slightest movement of the driver's foot. In an era when Ford and Dodge struggled with traction and weight distribution, the Chevelle transformed every launch into a display of mechanical authority. Yet, the Chevelle's dominance did not rely solely on engine performance. Chevrolet understood that a muscle car must also offer versatility. Many Chevelle models were engineered to be comfortable daily drivers, with smoother suspensions, improved interior layouts, optional air conditioning, and even luxury trims that blurred the line between pure performance and refined cruising. This balance allowed buyers to tailor their Chevelle to their specific lifestyles. College students might choose a stripped-down model with few comforts but high horsepower, while families might select a more modest version with enough power for weekend fun. This adaptability expanded the Chevelle's customer base far beyond the narrow segment of hardcore enthusiasts that Ford and Dodge often relied on. By the early 1970s, however, storm clouds gathered over the muscle car world. Rising insurance rates, new emissions regulations, and the oil crisis threatened to destroy everything manufacturers had built. Many muscle cars lost their identity as companies struggled to adapt to strict government pressures. But the Chevelle, even in its detuned forms, remained respected. It aged with dignity, carrying its earlier reputation like a badge of honor. While Ford and Dodge scrambled to reinvent themselves, the Chevelle maintained enough of its original character to stay relevant. Even as power figures dropped, the car's foundational engineering, its strong frame, balanced handling, and timeless design, ensured that it avoided the full collapse that afflicted some of its competitors. Collectors today often describe the Chevelle as the car that survived with its dignity intact. This judgment reflects not only the car's technical strengths but also the cultural connection it formed with the American public. During the decades following the muscle car era, the Chevelle remained deeply embedded in American identity. It appeared in films, music videos, and countless nostalgic stories told by those who lived through the golden age of performance. Car shows from coast to coast still display restored Chevelles with pride, their gleaming chrome and deep paint finishes attracting spectators of all ages. Children who never grew up during the muscle car era feel an immediate fascination, drawn by the car's bold presence and unmistakable stance. One of the reasons the Chevelle continues to overshadow Ford and Dodge rivals is the way it responds to modern modifications. Enthusiasts have discovered that the Chevelle platform accepts contemporary upgrades, such as fuel injection, modern disc brakes, reinforced suspensions, and even superchargers, with remarkable ease. This adaptability has given the car a second life as a foundation for restomods and pro-touring builds. Dodge cars of the same era sometimes require extensive reinforcement before accepting modern horsepower levels, and many Ford models suffer from limited engine bay space or structural constraints. Meanwhile, the Chevelle seems to welcome every upgrade with a kind of mechanical enthusiasm, ready to perform at levels far beyond its original design without losing stability. The car's popularity also surged due to the rise of internet culture and social media. Video channels dedicated to classic American engineering frequently celebrate the Chevelle's achievements. Drag racing clips featuring modernized Chevelles beating high-powered imports, modern Mustangs, and even supercars have added fresh layers to its reputation. Online communities share restoration tips, tuning guides, and detailed histories of specific models, strengthening a global network of Chevelle enthusiasts. Ford and Dodge communities are equally passionate, but they often face the unavoidable reality that the Chevelle still commands more universal respect across different age groups. Car historians often remark that the Chevelle represents something emotionally unique. It is not simply the story of a powerful American car, but the story of an era when people believed in mechanical greatness and personal freedom. The Chevelle symbolizes the belief that a machine can carry the spirit of a nation, a mix of ambition, rebellion, and craftsmanship. It embodies the idea that power should feel effortless, that engineering should serve the driver, and that cars should be as expressive as they are functional. Ford and Dodge built remarkable cars, but the Chevelle's identity resonated more deeply because it captured the essence of what muscle cars were truly meant to be: bold, unapologetic, and unforgettable. Perhaps the clearest sign of the Chevelle's superiority is how it remains desirable even among owners of other brands. Many lifelong Ford fans secretly admit that they would happily make room in their garages for a 1970 Chevelle SS. Dodge enthusiasts often confess that while the Hemi Charger might be their dream car, the Chevelle would be their second choice. This widespread admiration speaks volumes. It means the Chevelle transcended brand loyalty. It became part of American culture itself. No amount of horsepower statistics or quarter-mile times can entirely explain this phenomenon. The Chevelle simply made people feel something powerful when they sat behind the wheel. And that emotional connection is something rivals could never replicate. As the decades pass, the Chevelle continues to inspire new generations of builders. Some restore them to factory condition, honoring the original craftsmanship. Others push the limits, dropping in modern LS engines, installing custom suspensions, and transforming these vintage machines into track-capable monsters. The Chevelle does not resist evolution, it embraces it. Every modification adds a new chapter to the car's story, strengthening its status as an automotive icon. When people speak of its ability to embarrass Ford and Dodge, they are not talking solely about performance metrics. They are referring to the legacy it carries, the loyalty it commands, and the way it has overshadowed its rivals across time. The Chevelle proved that a car could be powerful yet elegant, aggressive yet composed, dominant yet approachable. It showed that true engineering greatness is measured not just in peak horsepower but in the emotional impact a machine leaves on generations. Ford and Dodge each had legendary moments, but the Chevelle created an entire era. Today, at car meets, on YouTube channels, in restoration garages, and on the open road, the Chevelle continues to roar with the same authority it had in its golden years. The sound of its exhaust still turns heads. The shape of its body still draws admiration. Its presence still sends a message: American engineering once reached heights that felt almost mythical. And few cars ever embodied that moment better than the Chevrolet Chevelle. It remains the car that embarrassed Ford and Dodge not by intention, but by simply being the best version of what a muscle car could be: strong, timeless, and forever unforgettable.